In this video, we're talking about activist investor Nelson Peltz. Oh man, a lot to discuss in regards to this whole situation with Trian Partners. We're going to dive into it up next on OG 55. Welcome aboard to another episode of OG 55. We're talking all about this proxy battle. Trian Partners, Nelson Peltz is making that move, trying to get on the Disney board. We're going to talk about it. We're going to break it down. Incredible drama going on at the Walt Disney Company right now. But before we do that, I want to introduce my brother, my producer, my collaborator, Mr. Vash Sky. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, happy to be here. This is, man, I've been doing as much homework on all this kind of stuff as possible, but I have a feeling I'm going to learn along with you guys here because this is quite a big story here. This is, look, it's Disney corporate drama, just like, 2005-ish, right? 1983-ish, 5-ish, right?
Yeah.
It always comes around every, I guess at this pace, 20 years, which now it's due time.
Isn't that weird though? How cyclical it is. It like almost to the exact year. It's every 20 years. Really weird. Really weird.
Very, very, very strange. But I will go ahead and dispense with the pleasantries. If you guys want to follow me at home, you can go ahead and do so right down there at Vash Sky. Just go ahead and type it in for all the, as Christine Waistlines McCarthy would say, for all the robust discussion right there. And trust me, we're going to be talking quite a bit about everybody up in C-Suite, so it's very apt in my view. And if you guys want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55, where we have shows like this, where we talk about corporate drama at the Disney level. This is fantastic.
Yes.
Orange Nerd, we talk about everything behind the scenes, right? Citrus Corner, where we talk about Walt Disney World. Jay with Story Geeks, where we talk about everything in front of the camera, basically, right? The stories that impact our lives on stage, all those kind of things. And of course, my show on there, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Pay attention, it's Joe time.
And you guys want to pay attention to this one because, oh man, we got a lot to get to.
Yep. All right, let's dive right in. So Nelson Peltz, activist investor, as they're calling him, part of the Trian Partners, is making a move to get a seat on Disney's board. Okay, this is crazy. We haven't seen something like this really since, like Dre said, in 2005 with Roy Disney and Stan Gold's Save Disney campaign, and that was all like. We talked about at the top of the show, like about 20 years ago at this point. But Dre, if you want to go ahead and set the table, we'll dive into this. This is fascinating stuff.
Yes. So it appears, because, and to give everybody a little bit of background context, we do watch a little bit of the financial world, a little bit, right? Because, Disney's a part of it. So obviously whatever happens on Wall Street affects Burbank, let's say. And so it's kind of important to kind of just keep one solitary hairy eyeball on that whole situation. Well, we were looking at it, and obviously Disney was making some statements, let's say, regarding some movement in their sector and for their shares. I forget the financial term for it. OG, maybe you can help me out here. But there were some maybe like goodwill offers towards shareholders in order to buy up their shares for more than they were worth, right? And Disney put out a statement saying, let's not do that. Let's just hold on to your shares as you have them. But we definitely saw some hedge funds and so forth. They were trying to make some moves here, and we all were kind of asking, what was going on there? And apparently that was going all the way back from November. We were seeing an uptick in all these kind of moves. Well, it might have all culminated ultimately with this, a battle between Disney and activist Peltz brews. Here's the situation and how it may unfold. So, essentially, you have a new activist investor in town, this Nelson Peltz, and he plans to mount a proxy fight for a seat on Disney's board. What's a proxy fight, you might ask? Well, the definition is this: a situation in which two investors, usually two companies, compete with one another in an attempt to gain the proxy votes of shareholders in a third company. In this way, it's working maybe a little bit different. Nelson Peltz is using his Trion group, which has investments, and he has board seats, or has been on the boards of various big companies, P&G type companies, right? These are some huge heavy hitters. And he has now gained, I believe, almost 1 million shares of stock at this point. OG, is that correct?
I believe so. I think, but it's worth upwards of $1 billion, I believe, is what they were saying. So he's got a pretty significant investment in the company, which is funny because that sounds like a huge amount. But I guess in the article it says that it's only really amounts to about less than 0.5% of the overall. Yes. I mean, it's crazy that you can have that much invested in this company, and it's only this much. My 85 shares is like a fucking nothing.
Oh yeah, no, it's huge. Wild. It is huge. I remember hearing back in the day. I remember hearing about how Steve Jobs' widow was like a huge, like the biggest single shareholder at the time. And I was like, how many shares is that? I think it was like around 7%. And I was like, wow, that it just tells you the size of this company, how many outstanding shares there actually are. But because he has so many shares via this group here, now he's making a case that not only is he, not only do they plan to be a bigger institutional shareholder, but that he is making the case that he should be put on the board itself, which is kind of interesting because I guess this has been going on for a little while now, going all the way back to Bob Chapek, and apparently there was discussion between them, and bizarrely, very bizarrely, Chapek responded to Peltz, who made this offer to be on Disney's board, that he had to take that request up with CFO Christine Wastelands McCarthy and not him. That was a very interesting case there. Well, this proxy fight has now proceeded, by which Iger, Christine Wastelands McCarthy, and Peltz were attempting to come to a decision regarding his board appointment. And apparently there was a deal that was almost done, but Peltz actually declined. It was, you get like a board overseeing position, is that right? And in exchange for stopping the buying of shares. And apparently that did not go through. So this is a really kind of interesting thing here. OG, you want to add a little bit more to this before we get into the campaign here?
Yeah, it's interesting. This Trion group has done this, or Peltz has done this to quite a few companies in the past, right? And mostly to much success, to be quite honest. But I've noticed a pattern that it seems like a lot of these companies seem to reject the offer. They seem to reject the offer. They're not really that welcoming, which is they're bringing him on board, which is interesting. I'm not sure if there's other dynamics at play there. Maybe they feel like it kind of weakens their board if they allow this kind of activist to come on. It's kind of a sign of weakness. Maybe that's something going on there. I'm not really sure. But an interesting thing here, though, is that he did make a move for Heinz Ketchup, right? That company. And they initially rejected his offer, but I guess he worked his way into that company and was on the board. Funny, though, after he did whatever he did on the board, I guess Heinz sort of kind of campaigned for him and kind of vouched for him after that, which is interesting because it shows like, hey, look, Heinz, they weren't on board initially. He got on the board, did whatever he did. And after he did that, Heinz was like, okay, this guy's legit. We vouch for this guy. That's interesting. And it's actually very encouraging for me personally. Look, at first, when I saw that CNBC video, his interview, there were some things in there. I was like, okay, I don't know. But he also makes a lot of great points, right? I think he makes a lot of good points. And one thing that stuck out for me in particular is he said that Disney isn't any entertainment company. It's more special. It's unique. It's its own kind of entity. I really did appreciate that coming from a financial guy like this. You know, a lot of these like financial heads, they see Disney as just sort of like this money machine, basically, right? And look, this guy probably does as well, but at least he acknowledges that this company has a special place in people's hearts, and it's not just a Paramount Pictures or a Viacom. It is something different and unique, and that really was encouraging to me because I think that's important. If he's going to get a seat on the board, I think that's important to understand what kind of company, what kind of studio he's working with here. You know, and you have to have that mentality going into a company like Disney. Something that I think Chapek, to be honest, we've been really fair to Chapek, but I think that was one thing that Chapek was sort of missing when he was running Disney, is that he kind of saw it as like every other studio, right? Every other company, all these other companies do this, so why can't we? He's kind of made that case. Yep, Disney is a little unique. It is a different animal, and Peltz acknowledging that was encouraging. Absolutely, in my opinion.
This is kind of why when you hear Peltz arguments, and we will get into the campaign shortly, don't worry, folks, we'll break it all down. But when you hear Peltz's argumentation, it seems like his arguments were originally crafted for when Chapek was at the helm, right?
Right.
When he was when he was on the seat, because it was apparent to all of us, kind of looking from the outside in, that there were some problems. There were some definitely some issues. And a lot of these kind of slides that we'll see here are seemingly geared towards some of those moves. But now Iger's in. This is kind of why people are kind of saying, well, Iger kind of knows this. He understands this. Well, but I got to be honest. I don't know if he gets the full... I don't know if he's had it explained by somebody who is coming from that position, let's say, or an OG. Like you said, somebody who's looking out for kind of Disney's best interest, or at least seemingly, right? They're kind of consumers, and the magic that is Disney say, hey, look, listen, there's some serious problems here. And he's making this case for a reason, because, according to Disney's corporate bylaws, in order to get a seat on the board, there are a couple ways to do it, but one of the most straightforward is become a shareholder and actually be put up for a vote in order to be placed on the board by shareholders. So that's why he's making this case, not only in the court of these institutional investors and these shareholders, but also in the court of public opinion as well. In order to do that, this is where this Restore the Magic campaign from this Trian group actually came from. And if you look at what they say, it's kind of a fascinating read. We won't go over all of it. I believe there's 36 pages to this. I don't want to bore you completely, but we definitely want to hit a couple of these points.
Absolutely.
But OG,
well, I was just going to say from a marketing standpoint, right? He's trying to win over investors and trying to get those votes to get on the board, right? From a marketing standpoint, Restore the Magic is brilliant. It's brilliant. This is the same kind of approach that Roy Disney and Stan Gold took in 2005 with the Save Disney campaign. It kind of it makes it more palatable. It's more marketable, right? And it's all marketing, absolutely. But that is important, and that's a huge part of what he's trying to do here. He's trying to gain support to get on the board, so he's gonna have to sell it a little bit, right? And by making it easily digestible for the general public and just whatever with the Restore the Magic, I think that was a really, really smart move, because most people don't really know what a proxy battle is. Most people don't really, right? But by making it that simple and making it where people can understand, he can win that support. And it's important too that he has to also get the support from people that don't necessarily vote for this stuff, if you have that public support, it puts pressure on Disney's board to kind of bring him on too. So it's not just about the people that are going to be voting on it. You want the public support as well, because that's going to impact big time.
Yeah. It might actually pressure investors to actually vote, their way, kind of thing. So
Right.
the court of public opinion is absolutely a thing, and this is why kind of Disney fans are, usually don't follow much of the financial world that closely. But when you hear some of the points that he's making via Nelson Peltz, via this Trian group here, you do become a little bit more receptive, let's say, because some of these things we've been saying for quite some time here. Yeah. They start off with this: Disney is the most advantaged consumer entertainment company in the world. It has unrivaled global scale, irreplaceable brands, inimitable parks, which we will talk about, and can leverage the Disney, quote, flywheel to monetize its intellectual property. For these reasons, we believe the company is well positioned to succeed. However, Disney's recent share price and operating performance have been disappointing. Total shareholder return has materially underperformed the S&P 500 and Proxy peers over 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10 year periods. Disney shares are currently trading at an 8-year low, and operating performance has deteriorated, including 50% decline in adjusted EPS since fiscal year 2018. Now, we believe that current investor sentiment on Disney is low, reflecting the hard truth that Disney is a company in crisis and faces many challenges that weigh on the company's investment prospects. And to that point, he's not exactly wrong there. While we acknowledge that Disney, like many media companies, is undergoing a challenging pivot to streaming, we believe that many of the company's current problems are self-inflicted and need to be addressed.
That's a fair assessment. Like,
right.
we've said on this channel, there are things that Disney can't control, like industry-wide changes and evolutions that are just being kind of brought on Disney's lap that they can't control, right?
Yeah.
Technology changes like streaming and what have you. That's something they can't control.
Yeah.
But there are self-inflicted wounds, like, buying Fox for $70+ billion, things like that, right, that they could control, that is hurting them as well. So that's a fair assessment that he's making there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, some people, I think Bellany made this argument, right, too, right, where it's like, well, the thing that's not featured here is the pandemic, right? Pandemic changed their operation and so forth. And it's like, well, hang on here. That Fox buyout, that was pre-pandy, right? And even back then, I was like, dude, I have serious problems with this. You're over-leveraging the company by a substantial degree. Who knows if any of these Fox properties will actually pay off here. We've seen integration even from the day that deal was announced, the deal was actually signed and finalized, right? We've seen very little integration between the Fox properties and even Disney Plus, right? I mean, Simpsons is doing quite well, but I mean, there's a whole host of other IP that the company can integrate within its flywheel, and yet they seemingly don't. We're starting to see a little bit of that change with Avatar, and it's poised to make a huge amount. In fact, I actually just heard that it just got a 30-day, a 30-day extension in China over the Lunar New Year, which is unheard of. That is absolutely unheard of. It's
unheard of, and it's projected to win the weekend again.
Yeah,
this weekend is supposed to make, I think, another 30 million. And I saw it this week, and I freaking fell in love with it. We'll do a show on Way of Water. I fell in love with this movie. It literally turned me into an Avatar fan. I am on board now for part 3. I loved it. But yeah, I mean, look, there's glimmers of positivity with this Fox deal.
Sure.
Avatar now is $1 billion franchise. FX makes great stuff, but $70 billion.
Drop in the bucket, though. It's a drop in the bucket. It really is.
It is. It's a drop in the bucket. It's just you just overpaid for it, Iger. You just overpaid for it.
Right. And then when something like a pandy happens, which, let's be honest here, I mean, I don't think a lot of people could have foreseen this. outside of Iger. That's a whole other story. But I mean, that's really tough, right? But because you have so much outstanding debt, they have to take out loans in order to pay off the interest on that debt, right? In order to pay those kind of things down. But again, when you have that much debt, it hurts your negotiating position. Now with rising interest rates, I mean, it's just like compounds and compounds and compounds.
Well, it's like a family. It's like a family, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so a family in good times. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and finance that Lamborghini. Let's get that
Sure.
Lambo, right? It's my 50th birthday. Why not? With no thought of the future, no thought of like what happens on a rainy day kind of thing. So then the rainy day hits, you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have financed that
Exactly.
Lamborghini. It's like, okay, and yes, no one knew the pandy was coming. No one thought, okay, we're gonna have a pandemic, once in a 100-year pandemic.
Not when the deal was made. No, absolutely.
No, but there should have been some kind of rainy day mindset with it. Like, okay, we're spending $70 billion. What if there's an economic downturn? What if there's this? What if there's that? All that should have factored into it. Unfortunately, it didn't, and maybe it did, but not enough.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, nobody was thinking that the bottom was going to fall out
completely.
on the entire world, and here is Chapek when he gets ushered into the CEO role, and within days of his appointment, which, unusual timing, theaters are closed, cruise lines can't actually sail, parks are closed. I mean, it's just every single way that the company could make money, and which is kind of funny because they've, they spread out their interests among so many different industries in order to prevent any being affected negatively by any one of them. Something happened. Well, now all of them are affected, and it's like, what the hell do you do? And that was no easy task. And I think what Treon is trying to say by not mentioning that is, it's not really what happens, it's how you handle it. That kind of thing.
That's
and
true.
Unfortunately, I think, it wasn't handled all the best. And I think maybe even Chapek would admit that. Who knows where he is? But yeah, self-inflicted, right? Fox was part of it, but also too, let's be honest here. And they do make their bones about streaming, right? But think about the streaming game, right? You're sending all this content, both your linear television product, or it would be going to linear television if you didn't have streaming, right? And your theatrical product all to this DTC platform, right? That's what they've been doing here. Well, you've heard my problems with that strategy, at least as it relates to theatrical. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is, well, they were for many years were buoyed by their linear networks themselves. Well, as this transition to streaming is actually taking place, and because they've gone so deep into streaming, it's starting to really cannibalize their linear network division. So you went towards a product line that was not profitable and cannibalized from your previously profitable enterprise in order to do so. That's kind of the self-inflicted stuff that I think Treon is talking about here. And honestly, been saying it for a while. I mean, some of these strategies are absolutely insane.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, you're right. It is, and they're gonna have to sort of find a way to pivot, because I do think linear TV is a dying thing. But like, if you can make the streaming your new linear, and what I mean by that is, if you can get more live TV kind of stuff on like D Plus or Hulu, and then you got the ad tier. Okay, now you're kind of cooking with gas a little bit, because now it's like, you're turning your streaming into what linear was essentially. You're making money. They got to figure something out along those lines. There's a lot more smarter people like in Disney that can handle that and figure that out. That's what they kind of have to do. That's kind of the direction they're going to have to go with this. Yeah. And Treon's absolutely right. You have to pivot. You got to kind of rethink how you do this. You can't funnel all this into a $7.99 a month platform. Mm-hmm. You're losing theatrical. You're losing linear money.
Yeah, and look, and Nelson Peltz, I mean, he makes an argument where it's like, Well, streaming's kind of easy. It's pretty straightforward.
No.
It's like, wait, what? You've got some of the biggest players in the game not able to figure things out. I mean, we've heard all the talk of Netflix, but I want to go ahead and lay this one on for you because maybe you guys haven't heard of this. Amazon has a huge streaming platform of their own, but recently they got into live sports, and one of those outlets for them was TNF, or Thursday Night Football, right? And they paid huge money to the NFL in order to acquire those exclusive Thursday Night Football rights. A little over an $11 billion deal for the next 10 years. And that makes every single game an $80 million production.
Wow.
That's their buy-in to that. That's not paying for the production of that game. That's just basically saying, here's the check for just the rights to get it, right? And then it goes out on their streaming platform. Well, it horribly underperformed. I mean, you're talking, their internal numbers suggest maybe 11 million viewers each game, which, by the way, that's off from 13 million that used to watch those games via linear networks. I believe it was on the NFL Network at that time. So you're already down the hole. And some of the, like Nielsen is suggesting that maybe it was like 9.6 million, right? So there's a disparity between Amazon's numbers and those reported by third parties. But it goes beyond that. So obviously they had ads actually played there, and they had advertising revenue as a part of that. Well, the problem is because it's so underperformed and didn't live up to the promises that they made to advertisers, they had to make good on those and run ads from those advertisers free on their other networks, like, for example, Twitch, just to make up for the lack of audience that they didn't receive with TNF. So you're already, you're $11 billion in the hole right there. Who knows what the actual production costs and, the sports figures and so forth. I mean, they were talking about giving Sean McVay, a coach in the NFL, like a $20 million contract just for like that year or whatever. So they poured out huge money for big name talent to be on every single show. And so you're in the hole there. And now you're in the hole because you have to make good giving out free ads that you could have sold to somebody else on these bigger platforms. That's how quickly, guys, that you can lose in this game right here.
Yeah,
now
they got to restructure. They got to reinvent the wheel. Basically, they got to figure a way to, and consumers are going to have to get used to that too. I tell you right now, the $7 for this all-inclusive buffet is not happening going forward. It's going to be much more expensive. People are going to have to be a little more frugal on what streamer they choose and what have you.
Or they're going to have to accept more ads. I mean, that's just how that is, and that has I think that has a limit based on like what the consumer will actually what they're actually, let's say, good for, right?
Yeah.
What they actually want, but also too, I mean, the advertising market is not necessarily needs to where it was back before the pandy. So there's limited advertising revenue for these big corporations to actually pay a Disney or a Netflix or an Amazon for their platforms themselves. So it's like it's a messy game here, and this is why when Nelson Peltz says, straightforward, we'll figure it out. It's like, guy, I don't look. You make some good points here, but on that one, it is much more complicated than it actually seems.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, and also I just want to say real quick before we move on to the next point.
Yeah.
Disney, and see, the thing with Disney too is that a lot of these companies now, especially with like Warner Brothers Discovery, right? They are kind of they want to license out their material more instead of having it like in-house, right? Which is good. I mean, that's a money-making decision for sure. Licensing out their popular shows and TVs to a Netflix or wherever, even like maybe over to Peacock or, that's good business. The thing is, though, I think with a company like Disney, it's a little bit different. Not to say Disney shouldn't do some of that. They absolutely should. Yep. But Disney is kind of like an Apple, right? Like Apple is very protective of their own brand. That's why they have the Apple Store to kind of control that customer service experience when you're buying an Apple product. Not to say you can't buy an Apple product somewhere else, but the bulk of it is from that Apple Store. No one's going to treat your brand better than you, basically. And Disney's kind of had that mindset for a very long time with Disney stores, Disney Channel, and it's kind of all in, like this one-stop kind of shop to get your Disney.
Yes.
So I do think there is a place for a Disney Plus, but there also is a place, I think, for licensing some stuff out. I just think with Disney, they got to be a little more careful than like a Warner or like a Paramount would, or even a Comcast, right? Where it's a little bit like even Peltz is saying Disney's a different animal. So you're going to have to approach it in a little different way, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you're right about that. Disney loves to be the custodian of its brand, right? They have Buena Vista Distribution. They have, I think, Disney Home Media, right? They have the Disney Store, Disney Channel, right? You're, like you said, your one-stop shop for Disney, and you stay within that bubble, let's say, when it comes to that kind of consumer marketplace, right? But with streaming, I mean, it's just a little bit of a different animal. Now, I do agree with you. I think there could be a licensing play here also too. And Disney was doing a little bit of this, but I think they should maybe increase licensing to be on their platform in order to augment their content library. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, if you want to go ahead and pay us, right? Because you have a huge number of subscribers, right? You have, throughout all the platforms and in all the various markets combined, you have the most subscribers in the industry right now, right? Between Hulu, ESPN, Disney Plus, Star, and all the other countries that they have involved. Okay, well, why don't you leverage that? Why don't you say, hey, look, listen, you can have your show or your movie or something like that on our platform, and you pay us to actually facilitate that transaction right there. You could call it like Disney affiliates or something like that, right? Hey, this isn't actually Disney, but this is just stuff that's on here. And maybe they're doing that with Hulu, but I think they maybe need to expand that, let's say, but they can still be the custodian of their brand. But this is a hard venture because you're going up against the heaviest hitters in the world, like Amazon, right?
Oh, geez,
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they recently lost like $860 million in market cap, right? That's more than all of Hollywood lost. And they're, nobody's ringing there are alarm bells being rung, but if that were to happen to Disney, I mean, they'd be out of business, right?
Yeah.
Netflix, they're getting billions and tens of billions of dollars of capital, venture capital every single year for content. You're in an arms race, and it's just like, it's like Panaka talking to Padme there. Your Highness, I do not think this is a battle in which we can win. That kind of thing, right? You are really up against it. So do you necessarily want to participate in this war endlessly with the amount of money that it's actually going to take in order to compete? Or do you change up strategy? And I think this is what Trian is advocating for. It's just, but we have different ways of coming to that solution, honestly. Absolutely. It goes on right here. Trian believes that it is well positioned to facilitate positive change at Disney, given our experience investing in and serving on the board of directors of blue chip companies and working collaboratively with management teams and boards to optimize corporate governance, strategy, operations, and capital allocation. That capital allocation, by the way, that's a huge deal. That's what we talk about on this show quite often, right? Yep. How are you allocating the little capital that you actually have, towards your different business interests? What have we been complaining about? Hey, the parks aren't getting anything. The parks aren't, they're not receiving any investment. They're not even receiving maintenance. They're not even receiving all these other things that keep them operating and keep people coming back for more. That's part of that capital allocation that Trian is talking about right there. And they actually make a point specifically on that. But we'll get to that in a moment. We recognize that Disney is undergoing a lot of change and quickly, and are not trying to create additional instability by replacing Bob Iger. We believe Disney is at a crossroads. It can decide to fight the addition of one qualified board member or work together with Treon to create sustainable long-term value at Disney. And so he kind of, I mean, this is the credentials, right? This has kind of been their interest. Look, your Heinz, right? Heinz is featured here, P&G and so forth, right? So this is Treon's history, or, you know, by proxy, Nelson Peltz's history, right, of getting on these boards and kind of turning them around. And I'm glad you brought up the Heinz example, because from what I understand, he has, you know, been an improvement to these brands, from what I gather. I mean, you know, obviously there might be failures and probably not listed, but overall, I mean, these are some heavy hitters here.
Yeah, no, and he has. I mean, I've been reading up on him, and he has made some positive. He's has a positive impact on a lot of these companies, and like I said, Heinz didn't want him on their board, and they ended up vouching for him after the fact. And I don't know, that I think that says something, you know. And we also have to remember too, this guy, he's not trying to like buy Disney, right? He's not trying to, like, Treon Partners is not trying to go in and like own the whole company, or he's not even trying to go in and be the CEO. All he's really asking for is a seat on the board. So we have to put this in perspective here, right? Worst case scenario, the guy gets a seat on the board. There's like how many people on the board? Like maybe 10 to 12 people on the board. He's got one voice in a sea of a bunch of other people. Yeah, I mean, he has power, absolutely, sitting on the board, but it's not the end all be all. And from what I've seen and heard about the guy, he's not the worst thing, you know. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't be super worried at all if he ends up getting that seat, you know. Now, the only thing that I think might be a concern, though, if he does get the seat and it's through a fight and not Disney willingly bringing him in, is it might make the company look weak, that perception they're weak, and it might invite more of this, and that might be why they're actually kind of rejecting his offer in the first place. I don't know. I don't know, but I don't know. If he gets on there, it might cause a perception problem, and it might invite more of this. I don't know. We'll see how that pans out. But as of him himself and what he's saying, the guy has points. I don't agree with everything, but I think he seems to know what he's doing. He seems to respect Disney as a brand, understand it is different. I'm okay with it. I really am. As of now, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and they put out guidance to their shareholders saying that they should reject the offer.
Right.
Which I thought was really interesting, because, you know, we've seen this kind of we've seen, let's say, how do I want to word this? These kind of threats, let's say, that don't necessarily look like anything, right? We've seen Disney kind of put out statements like almost immediately, and it's kind of like, ooh, like, why are you so, you know, why are you so threatened by these kind of little guys and these little hedge funds and so forth? Like, what's really going on there? Why are you so protective? Why are you so defensive when it comes to this kind of stuff? It's kind of a fascinating thing right there.
But I wouldn't necessarily. This guy has $1 billion. I mean,
oh sure, yeah. Well,
I mean, all things considered, this guy I don't think would be a little guy. I mean, he owns a lot of Disney shares.
You know? No, I'm not saying he's little. I'm just saying we've seen some. We've seen some groups, some other hedge funds make some runs for shares and so forth, and they'll put out statements suggesting, hey, you know, you reject this offer, talk to your financial advisor, you know, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, why are you necessarily doing that? You know, why, like, how many people are really kind of going after Disney right now? It's kind of my spidey sense gets tingles at this kind of stuff. But and I know yours does too, OG, where you know, you see, you know, people making moves here, and the Disney company actually taking it very, very seriously when kind of it doesn't look like much. So it's just I think they definitely are alert to the fact that there's blood in the water right now.
Yeah,
and that the
absolutely.
sharks are circling the tank here, and it's like, okay, what's gonna happen? We got to fend off as much as possible,
And I think that's why this is very important for Disney, because
right.
if Nelson wins, right, and he gets what he wants, like I said a few minutes ago, like that perception is like, aha, see, it worked. So that does that invite more of it? Now this guy doesn't seem so bad. Okay, cool. But what if the next guy isn't so great though? And now we have, right? So it might invite more of this if Peltz is successful. That's a little worrisome in my opinion. That does kind of it doesn't freak me out, but that does, like you said, Spidey sense. Like I feel like that does sort of ring a little bit of an alarm bell for me personally. I'm more worried about the ramifications than of Peltz himself, if that makes sense.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is it's an acknowledgement that there are more waiting in the wing.
Right.
And that Disney absolutely knows something. So
absolutely,
it's interesting. That's why they had to
scary.
put it on the front, right? Yeah, exactly. He says here, Fox acquisition has not delivered promised financial benefits. Disney's 2022 operating profit, excluding parks, experiences, and products, of $3.1 billion is 74% below the pro forma operating profit of $11.8 billion at the time of the acquisition in 2018. Even excluding streaming losses, Disney's Disney Parks, Experiences, and Products operating profit appears to be $6 billion lower today than the pro forma operating profit at the time of acquisition. This begs the question, is there a large Fox write-down on the horizon? What it's basically saying, kind of, is that without Parks in the mix here, this is not going very well, especially as it relates to the Fox acquisition. Like, the company is not necessarily turning that around. They're not financially healthy, right? And I mean, basically, Parks, Experiences, and Products is booing the entire company. And I think this is Treon starting to say here, like, okay, streaming is not necessarily working out. We just encountered a $1.5 billion loss in the DTC division recently, right? And we're not turning a profit on that for the foreseeable future. I understand that there are projections that Disney has that intimate that they'll be profitable fiscal, quarter four, fiscal year 2024, right? But it's like, understand that you've been wrong in your expectations before, or your projections before, which this does lay out here. But also too, like, you're and we'll get into more of this, but you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? You're sending all of that earning revenue and potential towards the streaming, towards these streaming services, or paying off this big Fox debt right here, but you're not actually putting it back into the business. And they actually have a slide based on that alone. But this shows right here that without Park Experiences and Products, the company would be in a serious world of hurt. So why are we hurting it? Why are we hurting that division, right? When that's the one making us money.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have actually said this in the past. I'll get to that slide. Go ahead, OG.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand that. I can kind of see the alternate point too, where the studio, and I've always said this, the studio is the heartbeat of the company. Without the studio, you don't have any IP to put into the parks. The studio kind of, look, when Eisner came in, it was the studio stuff that really got the ball rolling, because then you had Mermaid, you had Beauty and the Beast, you had Aladdin and Lion King, and then from those successes, you were able to put those IPs into the parks, and that kind of rippled out, right? It's the heartbeat. So I can kind of see Disney's perspective when the landscape is changing on the studio side, to sort of like, okay, all hands on deck. The studio side's changing. This fuels our entire company, parks included. So we got to go all in and focus on this right now. I can see that mindset from Disney, but I also see the alternate point where it's like, okay, that's good, but you don't want to go overboard with that mindset either.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the focus on the studio was a smart move, and it should be done. I know park fans don't want to really hear that, because they're like, just park, but the studio is the heartbeat, and you have, if the landscape is changing, you don't want to be left out. like of that whole dynamic, because that will hurt the parks, because now your studio's failing,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but Disney just went to the extreme with it. They just went too far in that direction.
Well, and not only just too far, but it maybe employed some strategies that maybe did some brand damage, which we've been talking about before on this show as well. So this is kind of what this slide is about here. We fear that Disney is over-earning in domestic parks to subsidize streaming losses. Check right there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a good point. I mean, and we've made that argument here in so many ways. Disney has historically relied on price to drive growth and margin at domestic parks, which we believe is an unsustainable growth strategy. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, Disney's domestic parks had grown per capita guest spend at a 6% CAGR from 2011 to 2019, with more muted attendance growth. This has shifted dramatically, with management noting that per capita spending grew nearly 40% versus fiscal 2019. So in 2022, they earned more money than 2019. How is that possible? Well, it is. If you're nickel and diamond, everybody. The recurring issues and complaints related to Disney cast member wages. While the park business experiences rapid margin expansion furthers our concerns, it is over earning, right? So they're trying to keep wages as low as they can, while making the park product far more expensive than it's ever been. And this is kind of why, I mean, literally, the Disney company recently, we've heard the potential of a strikeout in Walt Disney World, and how they've the Services Trade Union, I believe it is, out there in Florida. Well, Disney gave them their final offer, and it's like, you're not getting your $3. You're not getting your $3 increase in wages, and it's like, oh, we're talking tens of thousands of cast members that you cannot operate without. Do you really want to necessarily risk this? And if you do, what's the perception on that? Is it too much of a, is it too much at this point? Even me, OG, we've had conversations about this privately.
Oh yeah.
I'm not all about just, giving, and this is not even cast members, right? This is just any role. I'm not necessarily for severely overpaying for any role that because there are so many things that factor into that decision, right? There's so many different things that actually play a part in that. It might not be the best strategy, especially when you have 100,000 cast members, let's say, at Walt Disney World.
Right.
That can get very, very expensive very, very quickly. But if your rate of inflation in Florida is dramatically, it's just exponential at this point. Well, then you kind of have to give a little cash in order to keep people on. But OG, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I can kind of see. Look, $3 is a lot. I know it doesn't sound like it, but like, I know for my job, if I got a $3 increase, like at my job, right, in order to get a $3 increase, you would have to be just about flawless. Production through the roof, just the QAs like perfect all year. And even then, I don't even know if you'd get a $3 increase. That might get you a $1. Mm-hmm. It's pretty hard in corporate America to get a $3 increase. So I this isn't really unusual that Disney's like pushing back on a $3 increase. But like you said, though, too, to be fair, the inflation in Florida, the cost of living is going up. So they were behind
the eight ball. So I think the first agreement was reached in 2016. They just moved up to where they should have been, I think, by 2019 or so. Now it's 2021. They just hit. Now it's 2023, but they just hit in 2021 their $15 an hour kind of a place where they should have been earlier. And now, we've seen how Florida is just, everybody's moving there, and that is driving rent higher, right? That's driving home prices higher. That's driving the cost of living higher. And it's like, we have to reflect this, or else people I don't know how you necessarily work for the mouse when you have inflation going as high as it is. That's kind of the issue,
Right.
and that's also why these companies are kind of moving out of the labor game. Right? It's a very very tight labor market. That and it's getting tighter every single day. We're seeing huge firings, right? From big companies outside of tech, right? And this is why they're moving away from it, because the cost of living is getting so bad. The rate of inflation is so high. Interest rates are only getting higher, right? I get it. I understand. They're not in necessarily a win situation, but when it's hard to say our profits were higher than 2019, right? Which is insane, because even attendance hasn't been restored to 2019 levels, and by a significant margin, which is outlined here. And yet we're not going to pay cast members more. That's kind of that's a hard sell. And honestly, I say $3. Really, it's a fight over $2, because Disney is saying, well, we'll give you $1 increase, and it's like, well, we want a $3 increase. So it's a difference of $2. That's the delta, right?
Yeah,
and it's like, you're doing a lot of damage here. Potentially. Can we come to maybe a medium? Is maybe $1.50?
Yeah,
right?
And I think they will.
Can we get there?
And I think they will. I kind of compared this stuff, like these union agreements or whatever, disagreements, to like those carriage deals. You see, like, oh, your local Spectrum cable carrier isn't gonna show ABC because they're in a dispute with Disney, right? And it's like there's all this pomp and circumstance and drama and headlines about that, and then they ultimately come to a deal. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen here. You're going to see a lot of headlines. I think
so.
Negotiations.
They have to.
They have to. So they're going to come to something, and it'll be fine. The question, though, is that what does Disney do from there in terms of like, and maybe this is in the deal. I don't know, but it does worry me a little bit once you start hiking the wages, because then it incentivizes Disney and even other companies, really all companies, to sort of, scale back on how many cast members they might need.
Oh yeah,
automation
that will happen. Yes.
Right. So that's the flip side to getting paid more, is that, okay, now we don't need 10 cast members, we'll take 7.
Yep. You have to offset that loss somehow. Right. And that's how it's going to be. You're going to invest in automation, maybe cut back on a reduction of services, which they've already done. Gonna get a breaking point there. What I would advocate for is saying maybe we do $2 first year, 50 cents a couple other years. That way we get the bulk of the increase up front, and then a smaller increase later on. That kind of thing could be. Anyway, I'm not part of that negotiations, but what we're illustrating here is that the company right now, I think Trion is right. I think they are over earning here.
Yeah, and that's a fair argument to make.
Yeah, it's all in the interest of actually paying for their streaming debt, which you're gonna have to be in. I mean, it's an arms race, and you have to produce arms. That's just how that goes. Disney may believe that price increases and, quote, nickel and diming of cast members and other costs is good for the bottom line. However, we suspect it is a short-term thinking that puts the brand value and long-term health of the business.
And this is what I was talking about with Peltz, right?
Yeah.
When he acknowledged Disney's a different kind of company.
Yes.
And I think this kind of plays to that mindset where it's like, yeah, you get the money now, but long-term, what's it doing to your brand? Right? What's it doing to your? And I think that matters. Look, I'll be real with you. There have been retail stores, and recently, that I've bought an item from, right? Like maybe on their website, and I needed to return it. And the return process was all kinds of drama and back and forth with these companies, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, the company ultimately wins out. I can't return my item,
right?
But it's like, okay, you got my money this time, right? Like, the $30 for the shirt or whatever it was. Okay, fine. You won. You got that $30. Congratulations. Yep. But now you lose a customer going forward. Now you're not going to have that person that's going to spend money on your site ever again.
Wasn't I saying that? Wasn't I saying that, OG? I said, look, listen, you're going to have a huge wave of demand here when these parks actually reopen. Do you really want to shaft them now?
Right.
Because now you may have just turned off a slew of customers just as easily. Go ahead, OG. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. And to Disney's credit, they seem to be adjusting that. We've seen a lot of good news coming out with the reservation system and the free hotel parking at Walt Disney World. So they are the pendulum is swinging back, and for whatever reason they're doing it. It could be because of this. This could be their motivation for all this stuff.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, that's interesting. I never quite considered that, but
it could
maybe.
be. But at the end of the day, I think as consumers, we win out, at least regardless of Disney's motivation. I mean, we're getting positive changes. Yes. But yes, you do a short-term gain, and you potentially lose those customers down the road. Now we can get into do the super fans, so to speak, vote with their wallets enough? Probably not. Will it impact them? The amount of impact is questionable, because Disney fans are like all in on this thing, right?
They are,
but it's still a great point they're making, because you run that risk for sure.
I think so, and the airing out of dirty laundry, whether or not Nelson Peltz actually gets what he wants here, I think is also a good thing. Like, it forwards the conversation. It forwards like, oh, you know what? He's making a really good point here. Maybe we should. Because, I mean, look at that domestic parks percentage of Disney operating income. I mean, look, domestic parks right there, and then you have all other businesses right there. I mean, that's quite a, it's like, come on. We got to invest a little bit back in there, just a little bit here. Operating income, you can see 4.4 versus 5.3 billion in the fiscal year 2022. It's insane. I just find it kind of funny, because it's like, I'll talk about Josh Morrow just for a second here, because he did an interview, and I think we'll go over it in a future video. But even if we don't, I want to go ahead and air it out a little bit here, because it does relate directly to this, right? Josh Morrow was asked specifically about capacity, and how it's like, hey, Robert Niles, when he was asking him, it's like, look, you got to be thinking about capacity, right? I mean, that's got to be top of mind. That's got to be kind of a central issue. And Josh immediately pivoted away from that completely into, well, that's the beauty about our, what is it? Reservation calendar system, right? Our reservation system, and that we can control demand via the supply we actually provide. Basically, in so many words, that's what he was saying. And it's like, really? I mean, these parks are fuller than ever, and you're not even going to be mentioning an increase in capacity in order to allow more visitors in. You just want to control how much supply you actually put out, and a nickel and dime, as people come in order to get growth that way, right? And not from, more guests, being able to accommodate more guests in the park. Now, hey, look, listen, I think if you have a reservation system and an increasing capacity, those kind of things, they can go hand in hand and create a very good guest experience and drive return visits in the process, right? And that's kind of your organic growth. This is what Treon is talking about. They're not employing that strategy. They're over-earning. And they're nickel and diming everybody that actually goes in there, but it's not an organic growth, is what they're talking about here. And honestly, that's correct. And it's bad will. And that's why I think Disney pivoted away from that, especially with, like, let's say included parking for Disney resort hotel stays. It's like, well, yeah, like that. Yes. Are you getting an extra $15, $20, $25 from doing that? Absolutely. Right. But that brand perception, that's why I was talking to George, and I was like, this is the biggest thing right here, because that perception is absolutely there. Will they build that into their room costs, Sure. That's what's going to happen, right? At the same time, though, that perception of not seeing an extra byline when you're looking at that receipt
makes a difference.
That matters.
If it's all included, if you just you give the free parking, but then you charge the extra $15 to the room.
Oh, sure.
It's a sneaky kind of back way of doing it.
Yeah.
But I think as a customer, as a guest, like you said, you're seeing one charge on your credit card instead of seeing 10 charges on your credit card, and you're not constantly reminded to pull out your wallet and charge. It really is. Look, Disney's probably going to make the same amount of money either way, because like you said, they're going to find a way to do it. But it is very much a psychological thing.
Oh, it absolutely is.
You know, it's totally psychological.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I'm glad to see that there's a change in philosophy there.
Yeah.
There's a change of like, okay, well, and this is what I was told before. Hey, we're greedy, but we just don't want to be perceived as nakedly greedy, right? The perception of that, yes, we are, but we don't want the perception actually out there.
Right.
That goes a long way in both generating that goodwill and alternating that brand perception, I think, in a very constructive way. That's really kind of what Trian is kind of talking about here, and honestly, kind of on board. That's why I think I agree with you. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if he does get a board seat, because it's like, this is stuff we've been screaming about for a long, long time here, and yet, you know, it just falls on deaf ears, seemingly. This is not organic growth here. This is not long-term success. This is, you know, short-term gain, long-term loss. Go ahead.
Well, and the great thing about this too is what he's saying is he's not going in here as a hostile entity. He's not trying to oust Bob Iger. He's not trying to completely upend things. He's coming into this as a constructive, and like he's coming in constructively. Like, I want to come and I want to help, right? And having a different kind of perspective on this stuff, I think is good for the board,
right? And
because you can kind of get to a point, and I don't know all the board members. So I'm not going to make any definitive statements here, but we have a group of people that have been kind of working together for a long time, for a few years, and you can kind of get into your own little bubble a little bit, and to have an outsider come in and sort of shake it up might be good. And look, we've seen how friction like this does actually help the Walt Disney Company. Even back 100 years ago when it was founded, there was that friction between Walt and Roy constantly. These brothers fought constantly about money, and right? And that friction created a really good product, right? That's why the company is still around, I think. You saw friction like that, I think, with Michael Eisner, Frank Wells. That friction creates, sometimes the friction creates a diamond, so to speak, right?
It does.
And it can. And I think that he comes in there, and and like I said, he doesn't have a huge amount of just absolute power. He's not going in there trying to be the CEO. He's not going in there trying to buy the Walt Disney Company. I would be against that 100%. He's going in there just wanting a seat at the table.
Yes.
And his ideas are not terrible. So maybe why not? You know, let's see. I don't know. I'm open to it for sure. Now, something might come out about this guy that's total trash. I'm like, oh God, no. You know, but as we stand today and what I know right now, I wouldn't be crying over it if he ended up getting that seat.
And people are like, well, you know, do you really want these corporate hedge funds running the company and all this kind of stuff? And I try to tell people, I'm like, that's what is happening now. That's what's going on. Now, we will get to Mickey Views' video, which says a lot of the same thing right there, and a lot of other things. I definitely employ people to check it out. But he says something very interesting here, which we'll get to in a moment. But and to finalize this point here, this is kind of the first. I mean, because look, BlackRock has I think 99 million share votes. They play an outsized role in actually crafting company policy because of their share vote interest. This is what's going on now. This is the first time, though, that I've seen a corporate investment firm actually talk about some of the stuff that we've been saying on the channel here for quite some time. And it's seemingly, right, and now there's no guarantee that when Nelson Peltz actually gets on the board that he'll implement some of these changes.
That's fair.
And so you got to keep a mindful eye on that. But they're saying a lot of the right things, and I think that's why they're winning people over. But why is this happening? Who might be behind this? OG, get your Palpatine drop ready here.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
We're about to drop one on you. We're about to drop one on the audience here, I think. And this comes from Mickey Views right here, which if you have not seen this video, definitely check it out. It's the most recent one. This is definitely worth watching in its entirety, folks. Believe me. He gives a lot more detailed analysis on the numbers and so forth. Some of those slides up there in the forward part of the presentation that I kind of skipped over. But here's what he says about maybe who's really behind this effort.
Development. But here's where we get to what I've been alluding to about maybe there's something more going on with all of this. There was a little throwaway line that I heard when the news first broke from CNBC's David Faber, which set off alarm bells because one notable conflict in this Restore the Magic campaign is on the homepage they say, hey, we aren't against Iger. And then if you actually go into their presentation, into their report, it basically is all about detailing how Iger has done a terrible job.
Now, who would want to make that argument? Who'd want to make that case?
So clearly this campaign has a bone to pick with Iger. Well, hardcore fans who know all the players in the Disney sphere that we've seen influence things over the last decade, they're going to know what this means right away. It turns out that Nelson Peltz is allegedly quite close to Isaac Perlmutter.
Ike Perlmutter.
Oh, God.
Uh-oh. So if you guys don't know who actual Ike Perlmutter was, he was the acquisition that came with the Marvel transaction, right?
Yeah.
And the way that Bob Iger would, facilitate those deals is he wouldn't actually pay for these things in cash. We talk about the $4 billion acquisition of Marvel, $4 billion acquisition of Lucasfilm, the $7 billion or so acquisition of Pixar. He would do it in stock. And when that happened, he made some very, very powerful shareholders with those kind of decisions. And Ike Perlmutter was the guy that was managing Marvel, beneath, under this kind of Disney umbrella. And remember, Iger made that managerial move in which it shifted Ike's role away from overseeing Marvel, and so that Kevin Feige could report to Iger directly, right? And we saw some great.
Ike wasn't that great for Marvel.
He wasn't. I will agree with you wholeheartedly with this, but I mean, you can understand there'd be a little friction there regarding Iger and Ike for that reason. And I think Iger, does he talk about Ike in his book, saying like he's kind of a handful, like he's difficult to deal with? Does he say that or no?
I never read it. I didn't read the book. So I don't know. I didn't read the book.
Oh, gee, come on. Don't you have a copy? Well, okay,
I haven't gotten to it yet, though. No.
Okay, fine. Well, I mean, look, there are many, I think, places in the trades, if you go back far enough, that suggest that there was definitely some friction there leading up to that decision of forcing Ike out in the way that he did. Well, Ike took it out on Iger in that he made an alliance with the single largest shareholder at that time, which was Steve Jobs' widow, in denying the appointment of Tom Staggs to CEO. Remember, Iger was grooming Tom Staggs for CEO for 6 years, maybe more at that point. And then at the last second, it's like, he doesn't have any experience with talent, so force him out. And apparently, according to what Mickey Views is saying, apparently he might have been instrumental in getting Chapek onto the CEO-ship because he believed in him for the parks role. So that's a very interesting dynamic here.
And this Peltz is in bed with this guy?
Very close, apparently, with Ike Perlmutter.
Remember what I said not even 10 minutes ago. Mm-hmm. As of right now, I'm on board with Peltz, but something might come out about him that I'm like, oh God, this guy. I don't know. This is turning me off a little bit.
Open questions.
I mean, look, we all know Tom Staggs would have, I don't know. I really like Tom Staggs. And if that's true, this guy was instrumental in ousting him. Okay. Strike number one. Mm-hmm. He didn't do great stuff for Marvel. Strike number two. He was instrumental in bringing Chapek on. We know how that kind of turned out. Strike. Right. I mean, there's a lot of strikes here. I don't know.
There is. Now, I don't want to say that this is necessarily an effort by Proxy to get back at Iger. I don't want to say that necessarily because that we need a little bit more connections, I think, before we start making those allegations.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. I think this is a little inside baseball here, guys, but wasn't Alia suggesting that Nelson Peltz was maybe moderate conservative, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Apparently, Ike is very good friends with 45.
Oh, well, that's another thing.
that's another thing too, right? That's an interesting.
Right.
That's an interesting thing here. Well, you know. Making Mark Parker the new chairman of the board, I think we all know what direction this is all going to go here. Yeah. But Mickey Views goes on here, and I want to go ahead and play a little bit more of this. I want to get to a particular point, so. I might have to find it, but.
And if you don't know who Ike Perlmutter is, he is often blamed for why Parks chairman Tom Staggs was blocked from becoming CEO and why he left the company, which is part of why we don't have a succession plan at Disney, why there wasn't someone to replace Iger, which now Ike's buddy is complaining about and using as a reason to get on the board, which is not particularly honest or transparent on his part, because someone that he's friends with may have had a hand in why the succession is so messed up. We have heard from sources time and time again in the newspapers for many years that Isaac Perlmutter has a bone to pick with Iger, that they have had an adversarial relationship. It is said that Chapek was vouched for by Perlmutter to get the Parks chairman job in the first place, and then he might have even been instrumental in his rise to become CEO. And we know how Chapek went with all the nickel and diming. So this little mention of the connective tissue between Peltz and Perlmutter, which may have a lot to do with our current situation that we have at Disney, it makes me wonder when we talk about a Disney War 2.0, is it really just, these random, activist investors just showing up, and just being mad at the company? Or is there a phantom menace in the mix here who for a long time has had very valid concerns about how Iger spends the company's money, how he manages it, but most definitely there is a personal dynamic going on here where Peltz's Palm Beach pal had his authority over the Marvel Cinematic Universe stripped away from him back in the mid-2010s, way back when, by none other than CEO Bob Iger.
So we have been... Yeah. I know we've had some phone calls, OG, about where is this all coming from? We thought, hey, this is Iger creating a lot of this drama in the press and so forth, right? A lot of these attacks and so forth on Chapek. The activist investors coming out and kind of undermining him and so forth. Okay, that's where this is all kind of coming from. And this, all of this tide will be stemmed appropriately when Bob Iger takes the helm again. And now Bob Iger's back, and now we expected a settling down of all this kind of stuff here.
Right.
But it's not even gone away. It's in some ways it's actually increased from before. And we're all asking, where is this all actually coming from? Now, OG, you can go ahead and play that Palpatine drop if you want.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen.
And as Mickey View says here, maybe there's somebody behind the curtain actually orchestrating this. Maybe it's Ike. I don't know.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's funny because this is in real time. It's almost like when we did the video with Ashton about Splash Mountain. In real time, we saw her go from excited to oh man, what are they doing?
Right.
I'm kind of that guy right now. I was like, oh, Peltz doesn't seem like such a bad guy.
Right.
And now he's in bed with Ike Perlmutter. I'm like, oh Jesus, okay.
Hey, well, look, he's buddies with him. Maybe he's in bed with him. Maybe he's just a guy he knows. Yeah, it's possible. I guess maybe not. But there's definitely something going on here. There's something going on that suggests that maybe the company is being undermined in ways that maybe we don't think about. Maybe we haven't yet realized. And maybe by actors that have not necessarily entered the scene quite yet. It is a kind of a fascinating dynamic, and it's something to definitely watch for sure.
Yeah.
I still hold the opinion, though, that, look, Peltz being on the board of Disney, I don't think is the worst thing to ever happen. And I do think... I think at least the case that he's making, I think, is sound, and it's something that we haven't necessarily heard of from Disney leadership so far. Now, we've seen some of that addressed right on Tuesday with all of those announcements from the company, right? In some small ways, but I think there's a lot that needs to be done here. And if nothing else happens from this, at least this stuff is aired out so that the company can actually deal with it on their own.
Absolutely.
maybe we should also talk about too, very, very quickly here.
Sure.
Mark Parker, now the chairman of the board at Disney. So there's kind of two things going on. There's the external war with Nelson Peltz, and then the internal war maybe with some key board members. The significance of him becoming chairman here is that Susan Arnold was the JPEG gal, right? She was the person advocating for him within on the board, within the board, and now her role is coming to its conclusion, it looks like here. Now, some people have brought up the fact that there are corporate bylaws that suggest that if you're not in a leadership position at Disney, that you only have a 15-year term and so forth like that. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I get that, but they would have known, right? They would have known that when they elected her chairman initially. The fact that she's only been chairman for like 12 months or something like that, I mean, like a very short window of time, and then she's going to be pulled off here, that's a little weird. They could have very easily set up a nothing role within Disney in order to get past those corporate bylaws if they wanted to keep her in place. This tells me, look, if you orchestrate the coup, well, you have to get rid of previous leadership that held you back, right? You have to get rid of the previous regime. And she was certainly part of it. And them going towards Mark Parker, I think, is very interesting. Him being associated with Nike, CEO, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, he is. And actually, to his credit, he was very successful in Nike's succession plan,
sure,
which I think actually is just what the doctor ordered when it comes to Disney. I think Disney needs that. And from what I understand, he's actually part of this new succession group specifically created to kind of do this whole process for the next 2 years. So I think that's
creating
positive.
A committee.
Creating this committee, yep, exactly, to sort of figure that out. I think that's fantastic news.
Mm-hmm.
From what I'm hearing, from what I'm reading, he's been very successful at Nike. I know a lot of people are complaining he's woke and this, that, and the other. At this point, it's Hollywood. You're just gonna have woke people in there, But if the guy is successful and he knows what he's doing, I'm all for it. It's kind of like an all hands on deck thing right now with Disney.
Sure.
And the woke or he's not woke or it's kind of little things to me at this point. I just want someone who's in there who's going to help this company kind of get out of this mess. And that's kind of where I'm at this point, with it all. So I'll give the guy a chance. I mean, from what I've heard, what I've read, he's done good things at Nike. We'll see what he does here. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. We'll see. I mean, a couple things on this. One is Mark Parker was the guy that the board was kind of rallying around in order, or at least specific members of the board, to become to take over the interim CEO position, while and basically get rid of Chapek in the process until a new CEO was actually found. Now it looks like Bob Iger has taken up that role, right? He's got a very limited 2-year contract, and one of his mandates as being CEO right now is to select a successor and be part of the succession process. Very much involved. Now, Mark Parker is actually creating a committee in order to do so, like we mentioned before, but he declined the role of interim CEO. So it's kind of interesting how this guy has been a central figure in many ways. And allegedly, if I have my facts right, he may have been the guy that went over to a little company called Candle Media, knocked on the door, and said, "Hey, Tom Staggs, hey, Kevin Mayer, would one of you or both of you be interested in running the Disney company?" So this guy has been kind of instrumental, if that allocation is correct. This guy's been instrumental in maybe getting rid of not only Chapek, but actually moving on here. Go ahead, OG.
Well, and that's as a Tom Staggs fan, and even a Kevin Mayer fan, to be honest. I aside from his TikTok thing, I don't know what he was thinking. Whoops. But yeah, whoops. Exactly. Okay.
Right. Maybe right place, wrong time.
Right. Completely. But for the most part, Mayer did some really great things at Disney, and Tom Staggs was fantastic.
Right.
If this is true,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, this kind of bodes well for Tom Staggs' chances of coming in here, because we just said the other guy the guy they're fighting, Peltz. He's kind of involved with Ike Perlmutter, who is apparently no fan of stags. Yeah,
Sure.
this guy who is more of a fan of stags. That to me is encouraging. Not to say that we're going to get Tom Staggs, not to say they're going to acquire Candle Media. I'm not saying that definitively, but it definitely gives me hope that Disney is looking in that direction. If this is the guy they want to put as chairman of the board and head of the succession committee or part of the succession committee, that's good news.
Yes. I think so. It'll be interesting to see who they end up actually selecting, but to get some of the guys that were Tom Staggs fans, let's say, in key positions right here bodes well for that outcome. Let's see what actually ends up happening, but it's very, very interesting. Another thing I wanted to bring your attention to in regards to Mark Parker here is that, you mentioned TikTok before, so we might as well mention China. Mark Parker has a lot of interest, corporate interest in China, a lot of alliances that he's made with the government over there. There was an article in the trades recently that suggested that a lot of surrounding studios to Disney want Bob Iger to facilitate a kind of a realliance with China, right? Or at least open up the market a little bit and kind of go back to how things were. And they view Bob Iger as instrumental in actually facilitating those negotiations and facilitating a relationship there. Which I thought was very interesting because, as we know, Bob Iger, his enthusiasm surrounding China had kind of cooled. We played that clip before many times on this channel right here. So it's very interesting how the entertainment industry is kind of rallying around him in order to facilitate something here. We'll see if anything comes out of it, but there is one big step in that direction as well, being Mark Parker, chairman of the board. You're now got another guy that has a lot of interests in China and has established relationships in the past, and now he's being put into a position of power. We know that Disney definitely wants to get their Marvel product at least back in China. We talked about how did we mention it? We mentioned on the show Avatar. Got its 30-day extension there, which is a huge. I mean, during Lunar New Year, by the way, that's a massive deal. That I can't remember a time when that happened. I'll be honest here. So a continued strategy with China, is that coming back into the fold? It seems to suggest between some of the moves that we've been seeing at the corporate level that maybe that is actually happening. We don't know, but just wanted to go ahead and bring it to people's attention because I thought it was worth bringing up. The last thing. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say just to kind of bring that into the parks.
Yes.
That might be a positive thing. I mean, I know, there's some negative connotations. Obviously,
they have interest in China. That's just how that goes. Yeah.
Right. They have interest in China, and look, there's been a real concern. I know you were on the on WDW Pro channel recently.
Absolutely
talking, right? Hong Kong Disneyland and the COVID thing next to the park
camp,
and all that.
Let's say
the camp, right? So it's like there's issues over there right now,
Absolutely.
right? And it might be beneficial for Disney to sort of make nice with them. I know it's not necessarily the best optics because of China's record and all that stuff, but hey, look, I mean, what's the alternative? Are they going to have to close these parks down? And then what happens, right? So it might be a blessing in disguise, but you don't want to, I don't know, man. It's bad over there. You're getting in bed with some, God, it just gives me the heebies, but it's a tough call.
It is a tough call because you have a financial stake there, and some of these products that you're putting out are only viable with China being in the mix right here. But then there is a kind of Eastern relationship forming between China and Russia, and this could spiral out of control very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously, because they may have divested interests away from Russia, you cannot do the same in China. You just can't. So
you have two big parks there. I mean, and we've never seen a Disney park close. Do we really want to start that now? I don't know. And then, or does it even close? Does the country just take them over? And then what?
I mean, and that's within the purview of China.
Right.
I'll put it like this. You remember reading about, I believe this was on Walt Disney World Today, where there was a breakout, let's say, in Shanghai Disneyland, where it was, I guess, one person may have been sick, right? And they locked the entire park down for many, many hours, maybe even days if you look at the timeline, just because of that one outbreak, right? And Disney had no control of that. That was a government of China decision right there. That just tells you, how much control.
Right.
It's the meme, right, with Bane, right? He's, do you feel in charge?
Bane, you got to do the voice changer for that one. You gotta
okay.
That's a Bane voice. You gotta do Bane.
Let me see if I can do it here.
Do you feel in charge?
Or
Do you feel in charge?
that kind of thing, right? Something like that, right?
That's nice.
It's a little bit like that, and I'm telling you, folks, it's a very delicate situation.
It
is.
Here,
so
it is, and they're and like you said, they're already like heavily in, like so. Okay, so obviously, like there's all kinds of issues with China. I get it, but when you have so much investment in there, it's almost like you have to play ball. So it might be a good thing to have him in there, and then instead of having this entity that's openly hostile to the company,
right,
where you have, two parks and you got to have movies out there. I don't know. It might be a good thing if having Iger there to kind of at least to cool the temperature down a little bit.
And if nothing else, establishing some kind of relationship might make the facilitation of divesting of interests that much more work out in Disney's favor, let's say. Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like, it's just, you're kind of in bed with them, right?
What can you do now? I mean, it's really gross, but you're already there, so you got to deal with it,
Of course, you're in the relationship, right? You got married. Yeah. So now, okay, do you stick together for the kids, or do you divorce, and can we do that amicably? That's kind of where they're at right here, folks. There's no good options. It's just what's the least bad. Right. So that's kind of where they're at. Thank you, Iger. That's very appreciative. Yeah, but
that was one of Iger's not so good decisions. Was kind of doubling and tripling down on that, and he's acknowledged that, I think, in some interviews, that he might have overestimated, I think you said, right?
Yes.
The potential over there or something. And I get it. It's just, man, that and the Fox thing, I think, are the two big black eyes,
Yeah. And people, I think we saw some Twitter personalities online say, well, this Nelson Peltz thing and everything like that, he's the great deal maker. We'll be fine. It's like, guys, the great deal maker, really? Like, what deal has actually worked out long term? $70 billion for Fox and so forth. He's a great spender, right? But there's this one anecdote that I love hearing about, which was for the Carson project for a NFL team for LA. Well, for a lot of years there, LA didn't have an NFL team, and now they were potentially getting three with the at that point the St. Louis Rams, the San Diego Chargers, and the Oakland Raiders, right? And Bob Iger was instrumental in maybe facilitating a deal there, and there were a couple of proposals on the table, and he was advocating for the Carson project. And he comes into the NFL ownership arena, which is filled with billionaires, and saying, well, I think you guys should listen to me, because Disney, I've paid more money into NFL than probably any other person with our ESPN rights and so forth. And he leads off with that, doesn't go, that joke doesn't necessarily resonate with these guys. And as he's leaving from giving that pitch, Jerry Jones, who is an instrumental figure within the NFL, owner of the Dallas Cowboys, says, did I just hear him correctly? From what I understand, that was Disney shareholder money, not his money that being invested with the NFL. So why should we listen to him? That kind of thing. And that's how he sounds. And it was just like, deal maker? I don't know, but you have to get these deals done. These things, were bought into, or they invested into, and they had to take appropriate measures at this point. And hopefully, whatever happens between China, Nelson Peltz, Mark Parker, whatever, hopefully it's in the company's best interest going forward.
Yeah, I think as a deal maker, I think he's had a lot of hits. He's had some misses too, and I think like you can point to a string of hits. Marvel, Lucasfilm, Pixar making those deals, that was fantastic. But then he also, like you said, Dre, he overpaid on Fox. Hey, that wasn't so great. And he couldn't really even. A lot of people forget this, but he was on Governor Gavin Newsom's Economic Recovery Board.
That's right.
Right, he couldn't seem to get that whole thing worked out for Disney in terms of bringing the parks back. So, look, I think he is. I mean, honestly, I think he is a good deal maker. I think that maybe there is in the trades a little bit of an exaggeration in regards to like how good. I think he's a solid deal maker. Look, all these guys, have their misses on record. These big CEOs, and he's definitely not. Exempt to that. He has those big misses, but he also has some pretty good hits on there too. So for me, it's kind of a little bit of a mix,
Well, I will say there have been some good deals had. There have been some bad ones as well, and he has kind of fumbled some issues. Just recently, we heard about the the RCID thing, which we will talk about at some point.
Oh yeah,
where a lot of people were expecting, hey, he's going to come in here, he's going to make it all right, and then we hear from the trades that DeSantis is relenting and so forth, and nothing's actually going to happen. We're just going to have 2 board members on the RCID board of governors, and we'll be fine. And now it's like, oh nope, we're not relenting, and actually, we're having all of the board members be governor appointed.
And that's the thing too. And that's the thing too, is like sometimes, okay, in order to make a deal, both parties are going to have to want to make a deal, right?
Sure,
that's like step number one. And I think with that whole thing, DeSantis really has he has he's on the higher ground. He has the high ground, so to speak, right? To kind of reference Star Wars, okay?
Yeah, he does.
He has the high ground, so it's like he knows Disney can't uplift the resort and move out of the state. If they could, I think DeSantis would be a little bit kissing Disney's ass completely.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Right,
it'd be a much more level playing field.
Absolutely. So it's like DeSantis doesn't want to make a deal because politically this is good for him, and even like with Disney and Comcast, right? Like it's like. Comcast, they don't really have much incentive to like work a deal out to give Disney the Marvel theme park rights. Like there's like they don't like more. I think from what I understand, Universal doesn't really want to even make a deal. So there's really not much you can offer Universal realistically without overpaying or something, giving away the farm. That's going to make Comcast happy to do that. Like they're not in the position to want to make that deal, so you're never going to make that deal. They don't want it, So part of that is in that equation too, I think.
Yes, you're right. Okay, there's definitely a little bit of that going on, but you have to be willing to concede, I think, to the point that that would make an opposite party interested, and it's just we've not seen concessions on that level to that degree, and it's kind of hurt a lot of stuff. I mean, I made this case before. It was like, look, listen, the Marvel rights are still outstanding. It's not necessarily good. It's obviously not good for Disney, but it's not even that good for Universal because now they have a portion of their premier theme park that they can't even update and so forth.
That's
we
good.
Come to something like there?
Good
and
point.
it's like, we have Marvel product in all the other parks, and it's like not to the degree that we could have if Orlando could get involved. We don't have a Star Wars Galaxy's Edge type themed area because, the development of that would be copiously expensive, and you'd want to duplicate that, and you just can't. So that's why we get Avengers Campus, and it's like, what could a Marvel land look like if we just, could really blow out the doors on this thing? And unfortunately, we just haven't been able to see that because that deal hasn't been done.
Well, and honestly, I mean, Disney has other parks they can build Marvel in. I think Disney just got cheap about Avengers Campus,
They do, but do you undercut that much capital investment in your other parks when your premier park can't take advantage of it? That's kind of the problem.
Right.
One more thing, real fast. OG, you want to share my screen? Just real quickly here. There's not really much to say about this. But a couple things, right? Maishet had this update on the Magic Key lawsuit. A lot of people have kind of been wondering what's been going on there, and apparently it's still going through the court process. Well, it is confirmed here. A proposed order to revise the deadlines has just been submitted. In simplest terms, they are trying to push everything back by about 3 months. Both parties, I think, is what he's saying here. This confirms that mediation failed and the case is still proceeding. So remember how I was saying, I don't think she's going to relent. I don't think they're going to necessarily settle this thing out of court. I think they're on the war path and going forward with this. Sure enough, it looks like that is correct, and it is moving forward.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting to see how this affects key holders, because, I mean, this woman will get a big payout, and you know, Disney will pay you know, the fine or whatever, but I think there's ramifications here for this happening. For key holders, all key holders. Disney's going to be a little bit.
We've experienced some of them already.
Exactly. It's not. If you're a key holder, I'd be a little weary about rooting for this, because the changes might not necessarily benefit key holders. You're probably gonna see a Disney that's a little more apprehensive in regards to this demographic of their park, or you're just going to sign away all your rights when you order one. I don't know. Well, Disney will figure it out, though, and I think that this might lead to some things that key holders might not be too happy about.
They've already compartmentalized their damages, you know, with isolating this to only this version of the Magic Key, right? That's why when the second version of the Magic Key came out, there were so many policy changes, right? In order to prevent this from ever happening again. So I think they've mitigated their losses, let's say, even if they do lose, which, you know, is open question, still going through the court process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it did get those policy changes put into effect. So there you go. That's something. It's not necessarily to the Magic Key's benefit, but that happened.
It did, because remember the key they removed was the one with the no blackout dates.
Yeah.
So it's like now you have every pass has a blackout date largely because of this.
Yes, largely because of this. Yeah. There's a saying in Vegas, the house always wins. Well, in Disney, the mouse always wins.
Right.
Well, they're going to win again. So anyway, good update, I think, on all the things happening at Disney, whether it be on the corporate level, on the geopolitical level, whether it be, you know, in the small state court level, right? It is a fascinating time to be a fan, and the more changes are coming. We talked about a host of changes that were coming to Walt Disney World. We still have to do a video on all the changes coming to Disneyland, all of those changes in the marketplace, right? And in terms of demand and so forth when it comes to the parks, but also the changing entertainment landscape. Yeah, strap on, folks. It's going to be a wild ride.
Wild ride. And and before we close it out, I just want to give a huge shout out to Mickey Views. We featured his video in this video.
Yes.
Subscribe to him. Braden is awesome.
Yeah.
I don't always agree with Braden, you know, and I don't always agree with him, but I don't really care. I really enjoy his content. He always comes at it from a real articulate, intelligent perspective, and agree or disagree. I mean, the kid knows what he's talking about, and I respect the hell out of him. So go ahead and subscribe to him, because he is awesome.
Absolutely. And I just went ahead and sent that link over to their OG. Make sure you put that in the maybe the description there, and give him a shout out on that specific video, because honestly, that video, I mean, it's a little long. I think it's definitely one of his longer ones. I think it's like 30 minutes or so. Cool. But it's mandatory viewing. If you want to know, you know, everything there is to know about this Nelson Peltz situation, definitely check that out as well. We've offered commentary, but he will break it down analytically and what the exact arguments are he is positing. And honestly, I mean, like we said before, his arguments, I don't know, you know, they might get you to rethink. It's a fascinating time for sure.
Well, in real time, he had me rethinking, because I had no idea this Ike Perlmutter connection. I'm like, oh man, you know, I was like, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. So yeah, I mean, the kid, hey, he's got some great content. I'm definitely on board, and definitely, if you're a Disney fan and you like what we do here, you'll like what he does over there. Absolutely.
100%. 100%.
But Producer Dre, thank you for coming on, brother. I do appreciate you as always, talking shop, corporate, talking all kinds of stuff, Magic Key. If you can let everybody home know where they can find you on social media.
Hey, best place to find me is going to be at VashSky on Twitter. It's right down there. Just go ahead and type that in. Should pop up for, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there, right? And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55, which we have shows like the one you're watching right now with our beloved OG, his also Orange Nerd, where we talk about everything behind the camera, Jay with his Story Geeks, where we talk about everything in front of the camera, the stories that most impact our lives, George with his Citrus Corner, where we talk about everything Walt Disney World. It's the premier destination. Vacation Kingdom, you got to talk about it. And my show as well on there, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
But really nothing compares with a freshly squeezed.
Ah, you gotta love Freshly Squeezed. Gotta love Out of the Woo as well. But well, there you go.
There we go. Thank you all for watching. Comment down below. We would love to hear from you. Thank you all so much for your support. Every time you watch the video, like the video, share the video. We are forever grateful. Thank you. And as always, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.